This is CBC Here and Now.
Temperatures have cooled down, but another warm-up to end the work week and more rain in the forecast.
Given the fact that it has taken 10 years, I am pleased that some steps that I see in the recommendations have already been taken.
The report into search and rescue outlines more than a dozen recommendations, including more teams, training, and funding.
Those findings 9 years after the death of 14-year-old Burton Winters.
And they actually have some of the oldest signs of life anywhere in the world.
Fossils along Kitty Vitty.
A Munn scientist explains why boulders along the lake showcase some of the oldest signs of life anywhere in the world.
Good evening and welcome to Here and Now. I'm Anthony Germain.
And I'm Carolyn Stokes. A report from the province's search and rescue inquiry has been made public. It comes almost a decade after 14-year-old Burton Winters died on the sea ice off the coast of Labrador in 2012. Here and Now's Mark Quinn spoke with the province's Justice Minister this afternoon. So Mark, what can you tell us about the report?
Well, it is a big report. It's 173 pages that contains 17 recommendations. The inquiry, of course, was initiated by the Burton Winters tragedy, but the inquiry took a broader look at search and rescue services and the groups that provide them. Justice Minister Hogan talked about the impact this has had on the Winters family, who made submissions at the inquiry and have waited almost 10 years for this report.
Unfortunately, this took a long time to get to this point. This tragedy happened, I think, maybe 10 years ago. So it's, I'm sure that's upsetting for the family, but maybe a little bit of a good news story here today that has come to a conclusion.
Now, in February 2012, during the search for Winters, weather did prevent helicopters from getting from Gander to Labrador. At the time, some people questioned if a larger military cormorant helicopter in Labrador could have made a difference then or could make a difference in the future. Commissioner Igliorti identified the shortage of helicopter resources in Labrador as a problem, and he recommends that the province take steps to close this gap. But Justice Minister Hogan says it's too soon to say exactly what the province will do with this specific recommendation.
Not really for me to say, look, this is where I think the helicopters should go, Gander, Labrador, West Coast, East Coast, northern parts of the province and things like that. I'm sure there's all sorts of discussion and recommendations about that in the report, and that's why we did the report. We want to know what's the best options to provide search and rescue throughout the province, probably most importantly in Labrador.
Now, as I said earlier, there are 17 recommendations in the report, including a call for increased use of search and rescue spotters, better mental health training for police and search and rescue teams, and a review of the 911 process. Hogan was asked today if the government is committing to adopting all of these recommendations, and he said this.
Some of those recommendations from my quick reading of it does talk about, working with the federal government. So we have to do that to see, who's responsible for what in those recommendations. And second of all, we do need to look at what they are, the costing of them, the best way to move them forward, and of course, which ones are within the jurisdiction of the provincial government. So it will take a little bit of time.
Now, late this afternoon, the Provincial Progressive Conservative Party issued a statement calling for the recommendations of the report to be implemented quickly and urging the federal government to give more support for search and rescue. Anthony?
All right, thank you. That's Mark Quinn reporting live in our newsroom. Well, after record rainfall amounts washed out the lone road leading into Port aux Basques, the TCH reopened early this afternoon. While work is still ongoing, crews have managed to get one lane open near the weigh scales outside of Port aux Basques. Construction continued overnight to get traffic flowing on the highway, and it will continue for the foreseeable future. A release from the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure says work is continuing on highways in the Codroy, but no date on when those roads will reopen.
Well, sticking with the Southwest, new records this month for the month of November. No surprise after all of that rain. 359.2 millimeters of rain fell in Port aux Basques. That does break the old previous record of about 294.4 millimeters back in November 1958. Not only did it break that record, but it broke the all-time monthly record of 354.45 millimeters, and that was back in December December of 1990. So we are seeing a little bit of a break in that rainfall the last couple of days. Not really a whole lot happening right now, and really won't through the day tomorrow, but we are watching the next system that's getting itself together just further west, and that is going to be our next weather maker. It is bringing some significant rainfall, it looks like, for the southern areas of the island. St. Conagra and Burin Peninsulas in a special weather statement. Lots of rain. I'll get into that detail when I come back.
Thank you, Ashley. The Omicron variant has arrived in Canada, but there have been no cases in this province. But Newfoundland and Labrador is bracing for cases here. Here now is Peter Cowan is live in our newsroom tonight with some more details on this. So Peter, what's the Chief Medical Officer of Health saying about this?
Anthony, like a lot of experts, she's saying we don't have enough information yet to know about how it will impact this province, but she is warning we should expect to see cases here. Right now, indications are that this variant transmits easier from person to person, but scientists are still studying that and whether it makes people sicker.
We really don't have much information about disease severity at this point. You know, some of the countries where we're seeing this variant have very low vaccination rates, and so you know, even Delta in unvaccinated people can lead to quite severe disease. So we're still waiting to see some of that information come in. I think it's just the sheer number of changes that we're seeing with this variant that have people concerned.
Now, the province is doing what it can to prepare. So labs here, for example, are working so they'll be able to test for that variant when people test positive for COVID. In the United States, they're recommending that everyone get a third booster dose of COVID-19 vaccine 6 months after their second shot. Right now, people in this province, it's only a limited list. For example, if you're 70 or older or in an Indigenous community, that you're able to get that booster shot. Dr. Fitzgerald says they are still waiting for national guidance.
We'll be waiting for NACI to make that recommendation, and when they do, you know, we'll certainly be considering that, and you know, as we have often done or almost always done in the past, follow that recommendation.
The recommendation from her continues to be that vaccination is the best way to protect yourself. And let's take a little look at the provincial vaccination numbers, which are actually pretty good. Among people over 12, 91% are now fully vaccinated. That's amongst the best in the country. Vaccinations of children have started, and even though we're only 5 days in, already 10%, or just over 3,000 of those eligible children, have received a first dose. Now, there are still some regional variations. So, for example, when you look at people over the age of 12, Bell Island is about 80% fully vaccinated. Meanwhile, the top of the list, Paradise and CBS are 98.6% fully vaccinated. Those numbers have risen in advance of the December 17th deadline for provincial workers and some others to be fully vaccinated in order to be able to come to work. Reporting live in the newsroom, I'm Peter Cowan for Here and Now.
Well, there are construction issues at 2 long-term care facilities in this province that are causing delays. Officials say hundreds of deficiencies were found earlier this year at long-term care projects in Gander and Grand Falls, Windsor. The list includes issues with ventilation, elevators, security systems, and nurse calling tools. Government says there's still about 100 deficiencies that need to be addressed, and it means the homes won't be open to the public until 2022.
Over time, these deficiencies have been dealt with. I wish they had been dealt with before, but they're not. We're dealing with the contractor, and due diligence is being done. It's taking more time than we want it to take, but and I've said before in the House of Assembly that I'd rather for it to be dealt with now before residents are in the home occupying the facility rather than after they're in it, because that would be another story in itself.
Where's the oversight? Like, who's fire commissioner rejected it? So that's one example. So where's the oversight now? Accessibility issues for seniors. Just think about that for a second. These are seniors' homes. I mean, big demand, 120 beds for seniors, and you get accessibility issues. So again, I think that's the problem. I think it really is about project management, oversight from government, obviously from the project team themselves, and I think it's, again, I just, like I said, we got 3 other big projects coming down the chute, and I think government needs to get it right because it's too important to not have it, we can't have this happen again.
Well, today is Nunatsiavut Day, and it's the 16th anniversary of self-government for the Inuit in Labrador. It was on this day in 2005 Nunatsiavut developed its own government when the Labrador Inuit Land Claims Agreement came into effect. And to mark the occasion today, Nunatsiavut President Johannes Lamp issued a statement. In it, he spoke about the gains that Nunatsiavut has made in supporting the social and economic needs of the Inuit in Labrador. And he said, while we still face enormous challenges, we realize we control our own fate, and history has demonstrated that we are a strong and vibrant people.
We have an update now on a CBC Investigates story we brought you last month. It's about the tank farm at the Come By Chance oil refinery and potential environmental concerns. At Tuesday's news conference to announce the sale of the facility, we asked the owner some questions about that. Rob Antle has the details.
This is Tank 106 at the Come By Chance refinery. It's out of service, and these pictures clearly show why. The roof partially collapsed, debris inside, a black sludge-like substance covering the bottom.
It's an ongoing process.
We asked yesterday whether there are plans to do anything about that tank. The refinery's part owner said it is not an environmental hazard, and the roof had actually collapsed before they took over 7 years ago, and called it a complicated process that they have been chipping away at every year.
I cannot give you a fixed timeline when that tank will be brought back into service, but it's something that is an important part of the maintenance plan of the facility, and it'll get done over a period of time.
More than 7 years ago, government officials identified the tank farm as the greatest environmental concern associated with refinery operations. They pointed to previous non-compliance with inspection requirements by former owners, going back decades. Yesterday, Silver Peak said it had inherited a bad situation when it took over in 2014, with 80% of the tanks not up to date on their inspection intervals. But they put a plan in place, and now they say most of them are.
We are fully in compliance with all the rules and regulations around tank certification, but it's a continuing process. It's not something that you can just turn the switch in one fine day and just, remediate every tank.
And there was this commitment from the incoming majority owner as they convert the refinery to produce renewable fuels.
I would jump in as well and say that all the tanks that we're repurposing for the project, and it's quite a few, every single one of them will, if it's not current with its inspection, it will be before we start back up.
As for pre-existing liabilities at the site, provincial taxpayers could be on the hook for potential remediation costs, an amount now capped at $180 million. But there is no commitment to publicly release information in environmental site assessments underway to figure out the scope of those issues.
We'll obviously comply with whatever regulations are applicable. Beyond that, we are a private company, so we have to make sure that everybody respects the private nature of the company.
It is still a private commercial business, as the minister said.
Private business, but an indemnity that could be backed by public money as part of the deal that played a key role in the refinery sale and continued operation. Rob Antle, CBC News, St. John's.
Been out for a walk around Kippens Lake? Well, you'll see the ducks and the boathouse, of course, but scientists hope you'll also be on the lookout for some of the oldest signs of life on Earth.
Yes, 570 million-year-old fossils were found in the boulders lining the lake just a couple of weeks ago. And they're not exactly easy to spot, so now there's a contest encouraging people to turn their regular stroll into a quest for scientific discovery.
On these slabs around Kippens Lake, we have rocks that are 570 million years old. These rocks are unusual because there are only about a dozen places in the world where you can see fossils in rocks of this age. So one of the techniques that we use when we're in the field, particularly late in the season, is plasticine, just the same as you probably have in your kid's bedroom. You can impress it onto an area with a fossil, just push it down with your hand, and when you lift it up, you get an impression of the fossil that you can then manipulate in the light. These things can be really difficult to see because they're only delicately impressed on the surface. There's no shell or anything like that. But if you actually illuminate them from a low angle, you can actually see how the fossils pop out The organisms that were living on the seafloor were basically stuck there on the seafloor. They had a stem that went up into the water column and a frond which was collecting something. We don't know if it was oxygen or early bits of food, but these things didn't have guts or anything, so whatever they were doing, they were just absorbing straight from their environment. So we pour water onto the rock to increase the contrast because the different minerals show up differently in the wet. So you can see these darker rings inside the fossils in here. This might be called Charniodiscus or Cyclomedusa. And this one here, which is smooth on the inside, might be called Ediacaria. We only found these fossils really recently, like 2 weeks ago. And there's not much time now until the snow comes, and we'd like to enlist the help of St. John's to actually find some more of these fossils for us before the end of the season. Because this actually coincides with Research Week at Memorial University, what we thought we would do is we set up a fun competition where if you can find fossils on slabs like these and identify yourself, maybe just even your hand or a selfie with your face, post it to the Geocenter Facebook page. If it's a genuine fossil, then we'll enter you into a draw. If it's not, we'll explain perhaps what you've actually seen.
It's fantastic.
That is so neat. And scientists don't know much about the boulders themselves yet. McElroy says they were brought to Quidi Vidi from somewhere in St. John's. He's just not exactly sure where.
Yeah, maybe they came from Mistaken Point. And tune in to Here and Now tomorrow because fossil related, there's an amazing exhibit opening at the Royal Ontario Museum on Saturday in Toronto. And Mistaken Point and fossils from this province are going to figure prominently. Really fantastic story coming up tomorrow on Here and Now.
Well, the calendar flipped, so did the temperatures, but double digits will return for most of Newfoundland as we get to the weekend.
It was a really nice morning this morning. Chilly out there, but nice, crisp, gorgeous day.
And the winds finally died down.
Yes.
So you really notice a huge difference, especially.
Much more comfortable.
Yeah, much more comfortable. Even though the temperatures were significantly cooler today than they have been for at least the last day or so.
Layers.
Layers, exactly. You
Bundle
can dress
up.
for it for sure. Yeah, let's take a look at those temperatures across the board. Daytime highs only in the mid-single digits, and that was for eastern areas of the island. 5 degrees in St. John, 6 in Marystown. Temperatures were much cooler through central and the west coast as well. Corner Brook only reaching a high near 0 degrees today, and then below 0 for most of Labrador. Makovic sat around -5 for most of the day. Now these temperatures are significantly cooler than they were 24 hours ago. 11 degrees cooler, in fact, for Mary's Harbour, 10 degrees in St. Anthony, and then anywhere from -3 to about -7, or temperatures were cooler by 3 degrees or 7 degrees for the rest of the island. Temperatures right now still pretty chilly, 2 degrees in St. John's at the moment. Lassie about 0 degrees, and then minus double digits for Lab City tonight. That's going to be pretty chilly for you as you head through the overnight hours tonight. Not a whole lot going on weather-wise. The snowfall, or rather snow squall watches on the west coast have ended. Didn't really amount to too much. We're still seeing some snow though, a couple of centimeters being recorded for parts of the west coast, but there's all that cooler air. So these cooler temperatures are really taking over for most of the island as well as Labrador, and that will generally continue as we head through the evening hours tonight. So still looking at that chance of snow, although shouldn't be in the way of snow squalls. Still looking at the potential for some snow for the west coast. Quiet up across Labrador, and then we're going to watch a little disturbance roll through for eastern areas of the island. Could bring some flurries and or showers. Looks like anything on the Avalon should fall as showers tonight, and then again that potential for some snow continuing for most of the west coast even as we get into the morning hours. Even the northern peninsula could pick up a couple of centimeters. Here's what it's showing. Now looking at the higher elevation, seeing the majority of the snow, 10 plus centimeters by the time we get into Thursday morning. Most areas, though, lower elevation should see somewhere between 2, maybe even 5 centimeters of snow at the most. And that should continue through most of the afternoon, but shouldn't accumulate too much after that. Temperatures tonight, drop a couple more degrees here and there, below 0 for the west coast through central, and then areas along southern Newfoundland as well as the Avalon should hover near or just above 0 through the overnight tonight. Winds not too much to speak of. Southwesterlies gusting somewhere between 20 to 40 kilometers per hour. There's those cool temperatures I was talking about for Lab City, -17 overnight tonight. Not too much of wind, about 10 to 15 kilometers per hour, but still looking at a little bit of a wind chill. Otherwise, the rest of Labrador should be fairly quiet tonight, except along the strait, maybe the chance of a few flurries through the overnight. Now, as we head through the day tomorrow, not a whole lot happening either. A little bit of a break in the forecast. The flurry activity will likely continue for the west coast, and maybe a few showers for the Burin Peninsula as well. But overall, we should see some breaks in the cloud cover. Maybe not a whole lot of sunshine, but at least a few peaks of sun through the day. Quiet up across Labrador as well. But then our next weather maker moves in. It does look like some showers will move in late day on Thursday, and then some snow up across Labrador, making it towards central Labrador as we get into the overnight hours Friday morning. Now, it is going to be heavy at times, it looks like, for southern areas of the island, and that will continue through Friday morning. So some of the early models showing about 50 to 75 millimeters is possible, hence that special weather statement for the Conagra and Burin Peninsulas as well. And again, that will fall Thursday night through Friday afternoon. Now, as far as temperatures go for tomorrow, not going to move too much into the single digits. The winds will again be out of the southwest, anywhere from 40 to 50 kilometers per hour, and then a few peaks of sun the further east you go. And then for Labrador, you're looking at your temperatures below 0 tomorrow, quiet to start, and then some snow will move in for Lab City, hovering around -10. Let's look at your forecast. We'll look ahead to Friday when I come back.
Voters in the west coast town of Kippens have elected a brand new slate of municipal councillors, and they have thrown out councillors who opposed former Mayor Debbie Brake-Patten. The province took the unprecedented step of removing her as mayor following a largely secret investigation that determined she was a bully. She was also banned from running last night. Jeff Young is a newly elected councillor in Kippens. He's also the executive director of the Halibu Cultural Foundation. Mr. Young, congratulations.
Thank you very much, Anthony.
So what should we interpret from the results of how people in Kippens voted yesterday?
I think they showed into their vote and into the numbers that's been posted by the returning officer. I think they showed that they wanted change and that they wanted, you know, to out the people that potentially had their mayor removed.
So I sort of looked at the numbers. So the people who were Debbie Brake-Patten's critics, they have been ousted themselves now.
Yes.
What's your sense of the way people voted to do that?
I think Debbie had a lot of support in the town, and I think that was the residents' way of showing it, of not bringing the support forward for the candidates that were I guess, against her.
Now, there's been a lot of controversy surrounding the decision to actually remove her as the mayor. What did you make of the provincial government's decision to terminate her?
Yeah, I was very upset with the decision. I still don't agree. Like, Debbie's, you know, a very educated woman. She's Indigenous. You know, she was female mayor. You know, she had lots of support from the residents. I don't think the government. I think they acted too quickly in removing her. And I think if she should have been removed, I think that could have been a decision by the citizens of Kippens into an election.
So, in other words, you think that she should have been allowed to run yesterday?
Absolutely.
If she had run, do you think she would have won?
I absolutely think Debbie would have won. She has a lot of support here in the town of Kippens.
So you say that even though, you know, there was this report and the province said that, you know, that according to their report and their investigation, that she was a bully who harassed one town employee. I know everybody in Kippens knows who it is, but I won't say that. Despite the fact she was found, you know, guilty is not necessarily the right exact word, but they say that she did bully and harass somebody. People still wouldn't hold that against her?
No, I don't believe so. I don't think every recruit, given the proper evidence, it was a last-minute decision. She already had her name in for this election. Her signs were out. And I think people would have supported Debbie. And from all the controversy over the last few years in council, I think the public very well understood that Debbie was not the problem.
So look at the results, 6 new councillors and a new mayor. I'll ask you about the mayor in a second, but all new municipal people and leaders for your community, which has been kind of bogged down in a kind of dysfunctional arguments between people. What message does it send to the province, do you think, having completely fresh faces?
The community wants, you know, new energy, new focus, you know, a whole new council at the table, you know, to move forward the community into a positive way and to create a sense of community here in Kippens.
Now, you're a new councillor and the youngest one, so you've got a great name as the youngest councillor in Kippens. What about the mayor? Who's the new mayor of Kippens?
It's Mike Comerford. He is he's a business owner in Stephenville and but living in Kippens, resident of Kippens. And I, for the first time, actually met Mike a few weeks ago. Great guy. I think he's going to do an excellent job, and especially with the support of all the great councillors that's going to be sitting at the table.
All right, well, it'll be interesting to see if some of the bad feelings that I think existed on council before, if those can be put aside. So let me ask you about that. What can Kippens do to put this really messy fight behind and try to move forward? Because you know, I guess a lot of people are kind of fed up with everything.
I think it's time to put everything behind us. It's, you know, start a new chapter. Everything's been dealt with. And move forward to grow Kippens and make sure we secure a great future.
All right, well, Mr. Young, congratulations on your victory. Certainly it's been interesting, to say the least, to follow what's happened in Kippens of late. And we'll keep our eye on what happens in that community as you head down the road to wherever you're headed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anthony.
Shockingly had more work in Newfoundland than I was having in Toronto before the pandemic. More like well-paying, gratifying, exciting work, which is not something I thought was going to happen whatsoever.
Exploring Newfoundland and Labrador's growing population by getting to know the people that are pushing the numbers.
Chrissy Holmes speaks with Josh Murphy to find out why he has come to stay. Coming up.
Well, a new food bank has opened in St. John's by the Muslim Association. The Newfoundland and Labrador Food Umbrella was the idea of Saeed Perzada after he saw the growing demand for food donations on the island and he wanted to help out. Now open, the food bank is looking for donations and volunteers.
Absolutely. Hey, there we go.
Well, today we are here to inaugurate the Newfoundland Food Umbrella. It is a food bank. We all know how much there is a need for food because of the COVID-19 and the economic crisis. People are suffering because we see all the time, especially when people have lost their job, there are single mothers, and there are people who are senior citizens, and there are refugees, there are immigrants who are coming. And we see them, they need all kinds of assistance. The idea was always in my mind, and I have been volunteering in different capacities. As a president of the Muslim Association, we have different volunteer groups. And so I've been doing it for a decade or more than a decade. People have already started donating because people of Newfoundland also understand that there are so many people who are going hungry. There are so many children who are going hungry, sleeping hungry overnight. So yes, indeed, the demand is huge. We hope that we will try to, fill that need and fill that void. Right now, we have just one staff who is going to be volunteering. Initially, it's all going to be volunteers. But down the road, we definitely want people, who can be part of it on a permanent basis. We, as Newfoundlanders, want our, people who are not so privileged to have food, to have, facilities, and they can also enjoy the Christmas and the holiday season.
Since the pandemic began, the province's population numbers seem to have turned a corner, and with more people, more things are now happening in Newfoundland and Labrador. Chrissy Holmes has been looking closer at just what's going on. So Chrissy, what have you learned?
Well, Anthony, a big picture, the numbers are really interesting. So for the first time in a number of years, more people have moved to Newfoundland and Labrador than have moved away. And looking at just this year alone, we've seen 860 people move here, and almost all of them came from other Canadian provinces. Now, the province's pandemic management, as you might guess, has played a big role, and it's led to growth in areas that just might come as a surprise to you. And I say that because it certainly came as a surprise to Josh Murphy, who never imagined that he would be back home in Newfoundland for work.
My name is Josh Murphy. I'm a dance artist, which is so many things. I'm a dancer, I'm a teacher, I'm a choreographer, burlesque performer, drag something, who knows. And I live and work in St. John's right now, and I every so often get to perform in this lovely space, Velvet Club and Lounge. I wish I could tell my teenage self in Corner Brook what I would be seeing and what I would be doing in St. John's as an adult. Growing up, I didn't see a lot of professional artists who were doing things that I wanted to be doing. I didn't see a lot of queer people, so if you're not seeing yourself represented around you, how do you know that you can stay there, and how do you know that you can actually do that? When I moved to Toronto, I thought that was it. Growing up queer in Newfoundland, even growing up being an artist in Newfoundland, you're not necessarily taught that you can do all of those things here, that all of those things can fit here. I didn't always necessarily feel right here.
At what point in your life did you realize, I'm a dancer?
I guess, looking back, I can always see where I enjoyed movement and how that fit in, because I grew up in TNL, Theatre Newfoundland and Labrador's youth theatre program. I started doing dance in high school, which is not uncommon for men to start later for those kind of things. I went to York University because my mentor, friend, and teacher Candace Pike also went there. and she kind of pushed me in that direction and helped me out with that. And it was very like helpful and honest and like really got me there. Like I didn't think I could get into a university program, but I somehow got in, even though I'd only been dancing for about 3 or 4 years at the time.
How hard did you have to work, given your starting point?
I had to work very hard, in my opinion, because I joined that program with a bunch of women and some other men who'd been dancing since they were like 3 and 4 years old, and I had only been dancing since I was 15. Every day I danced from 8:45 in the morning till 8 in the evening. It was a lot of work. And one of my first jobs in Toronto was actually joining a burlesque troupe, which is something I never knew anything about before. That was my really like deep dive into burlesque like that. I did bring some Newfoundland to it. When I joined burlesque, I didn't know I needed a stage name. I thought I was just like, oh, it's just another dance gig, Josh Murphy, that's it. And then I was informed I had to name myself something different. I didn't know what to call myself. So another person in my burlesque troupe was like, oh, you should be Newfound Lad. So I was able to do big things like travel to Las Vegas with them and compete at the Burlesque Hall of Fame, which is basically the Olympics of burlesque. And I'm just like honored that myself, like less than 2 years into that art form, I got to go do that. Yeah. So it was kind of overwhelming, especially because everyone in my group was in their like either late 20s or early 30s, and I was 23 when I joined. So I was definitely the young one and definitely had a lot to learn, but I learned so much so fast. So when I moved away, I really genuinely thought I would never live in Newfoundland again. Going into 2020, I had projects lined up from January all the way into the fall. It was all looking great, and then the global pandemic happened. And all of a sudden, all of my work stopped existing. I was suddenly without roommates, without a job, and without a reason to really be in Toronto anymore. So I decided to move home to Corner Brook in August of 2020 and take a job at Dance Studio West, where I started dancing in high school. I went from being like deep in the queer community, deep in like burlesque performance, all these communities in Toronto, to being in Corner Brook, Newfoundland, which doesn't really have that. It was an adjustment period for sure, but I'm really lucky to have 2 amazing supportive parents that made it that much easier. So when I moved back to Corner Brook, I pretty much immediately started working with Candace nonstop, because Candace Pike, she's my mentor, she's a teacher in Corner Brook, she's a dance artist in Corner Brook, and she's really good at getting things going as soon as there's people that do it. Because for a while she was the only contemporary dance artist in Corner Brook, and I moved home and it doubled, and then my friend and colleague Hillary Nee moved home and it tripled. So all of a sudden there's 3 contemporary dancers in Corner Brook, Newfoundland, and that's like the biggest number that's been there in years. So we're all there, why not do something together? So Candace and I had originally started collaborating on these ideas of like burlesque meets contemporary dance meets rural Newfoundland aesthetics. Ruralesque is the working title right now, and we've made the full thing right now, and we're gonna premiere it in April of 2022. Wow, 2022, that's coming. Being able to bring what I'm doing and what we're doing to like smaller places and I don't know, connect with people it's really important to me, to make people see that there's other people like them out there, or other people doing different things out there, whether they identify with it or not. Like, it's really exciting to see what's happening in drag in Newfoundland right now. Well, there's been a lot of growth here. And there's also like artists who've moved here, either they're from here or they weren't from here, and that's helped change the scene. Like, it's really like growing and blowing up, and we're seeing people get to do things they never thought they could do. Like, I moved to St. John's during Pride Month in July, so there was pride flags and rainbows and all those things everywhere, and I thought those flags were all gonna come down come August, which is what I'm used to with corporate pride and stuff in Toronto, but they didn't come down, and they're still everywhere. And everyone I know who comes to visit Newfoundland, they're like, there's so many pride flags here. Like, I'm so shocked, but I'm like, it feels better than it was and safer, and like I can just kind of be more myself more than I ever thought I could be in Newfoundland. Projects are already starting to line themselves up for like January, February, March, April. So it feels like there's momentum, there's moving forward, things keep falling in my lap and possibilities keep happening. I feel like there's like a lot of possibility right now. It's just, I guess, proved some of my misconceptions wrong. I just didn't think it was possible in a lot of ways, and it really is in more ways than I thought. And I get to light up a stage in a queer space, and it's shocking and thrilling. Really, really exciting.
You know, I spoke with the manager at Velvet, Fabian, and he told me that he had been working in LGBTQ club spaces in St. John's since the 80s, and he'd never experienced a business boom like he's seeing now. And he said a lot of it has to do with the growth of the drag scene. Now, if you know someone who has chosen to move to Newfoundland and Labrador recently and has an interesting story to tell, we'd love to speak with them. You can always email me, chrissy.holmes@cbc.ca, or you can email Here and Now directly, hereandnow.nl@cbc.ca.
The World Health Organization has wrapped up a 3-day summit in Switzerland. The member nations have agreed to develop a global system to detect and respond to pandemics. CBC's Tessa Arcilia has the details.
The almost 200 countries of the World Health Organization agreed today to start work on a global pandemic preparedness plan in dealing with future pandemics. So this could include sharing of intellectual property and patents and vaccines and drugs, sharing knowledge and genome sequencing, which is useful in identifying variants, as well as dealing with the inequity that we see in vaccine distribution, for example. As of today, more than 20 countries have detected the Omicron variant in their countries. An interesting development, Nigeria said that in samples taken in October, it seems that they have detected the Omicron variant. Now, this is important because South Africa only alerted and reported the Omicron variant to the WHO on the 24th of November. And since then, travel bans have been imposed against South Africa and several other countries in that region. So it does seem like the Omicron variant was already in circulation even before South Africa had detected it, and they felt penalized for having done so.
Blanket travel bans will not prevent the international spread of Omicron, and they place a heavy burden on lives and livelihoods. We call on all countries to take rational, proportional risk reduction measures in keeping with international health regulations.
That said, more countries today added to the list of those tightening their border rules. Malaysia, Vietnam, Japan, all trying to have stricter controls of letting people into their countries, especially coming from regions where there are Omicron variants identified. Here in the UK, the Health Secretary Sajid Javid says there's no need as of yet to change Christmas party plans, but he did say people should go get their booster shots. Tessa Arcilia, CBC News, London.
The United States Supreme Court is considering a case that's a direct challenge to the country's existing abortion laws. The High Court is being asked to rule on a Mississippi law that bans most abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy. Hundreds of demonstrators from both sides are at the courthouse in Washington. The current abortion law in the U.S. dates back to the Supreme Court's 1973 Roe v. Wade decision that legalized abortions up to 24 weeks. The Mississippi law dates back to 2018 and has been overturned by several lower courts. The Supreme Court is expected to deliver its decision in June. Earlier this year, Texas passed a law banning abortions. After about 6 weeks, the Supreme Court heard challenges to that law a month ago, but is yet to rule on it.
An 8-year-old girl has died and 11 other people were injured after a horrific crash in London, Ontario last night. Police say a 76-year-old woman was behind the wheel when her car jumped a curb and slammed into a group of pedestrians.
We knew as the investigation continued that there was no indication that this was an intentional act. And so very quickly, we shared that information through way of media release to ensure that the public knew that we were investigating and this was not intentional.
The pedestrians ranged in age from 6 to 40 and included a group of Girl Guides. 1 adult and 5 children are still in hospital today. Police say the vehicle hit at least one other car before going through an intersection. The car then struck a street lamp and then a tree before hitting the group of pedestrians. No arrests have been made and no charges have been laid at this time. Universities across the country are taking steps to deal with possible cases of Indigenous identity fraud. Now, that comes 1 month after a CBC News investigation revealed that a University of Saskatchewan professor, Carrie Bourassa, who claimed to have Indigenous ancestry, had no proof of those claims. Jeff Leo has more now on the new measures.
The University of Saskatchewan and the Métis Nation Saskatchewan signed an agreement to work together on issues of Indigenous identity. So the Métis Nation has a citizenship registry, and in order for someone to be part of that, they have to prove that they have Indigenous ancestry. They have to be able to show their genealogical evidence. And so the Métis Nation says it makes sense for universities when trying to determine if someone's Indigenous or Métis to ask them. And so that's what's going to happen in the future now when the U of S is targeting positions for specifically Métis people. Here in Regina, First Nations University says it's planning to host a national forum, a national conversation about Indigenous identity. The president of the university says she's been contacted by lots of people across the country who say we need to all get together and talk and share best practices in order to root out this problem of identity fraud. The University of Regina is one of several universities that are working on developing their own policy in order to address this issue. Ryerson is also doing that, so is Queen's. So I spoke with a professor who studies the whole issue of Indigenous identity and identity fraud, and he said he's been surprised at how many institutions across this country have decided to take action in the wake of the Carrie Barassa investigation, and he hopes that this will lead to permanent change in this country. Jeff Leo, CBC News, Regina.
Whereas Fat Cat or the Black Sheep, very fortunate to still have this room.
There's a community in the Black Sheep.
I remember it vividly, actually, the first day I held sticks.
I want to capture the gigs, I want to capture the facial expressions.
You're creating the song that you want to hear.
That made me feel better listening to that, and maybe I could write my feelings out and see how I like that.
It's really all about the music.
Here we are, December 1st.
Yep.
I can barely believe it.
Yeah, not a whole lot of snow either that we've seen so far.
Yeah, how are things looking now that we're kind of in the first week of December.
Yeah, you know what? Looking ahead for really the month of December and then further ahead, actually most models are pointing at the fact that we should be above seasonal. And it's looking like lots of rain on the way again, starting Thursday evening and then continuing through the day on Friday. Let's take a look at the future tracker, time that out. So Thursday night is when we'll start to see that rain move in for most of the island. Now Labrador, we've seen lots of snow, and more snow is on the way for you as well. So Thursday evening into Friday morning is when we should see that snow. But this low, again, going to take a similar track to the last one we just saw, which means we'll see some rain for southeastern portions of Labrador, and then all rain for the island as we head through Friday. And it will be heavy at times. I mentioned a little bit earlier that Environment Canada does have that special weather statement in effect for the Canagar and Burin Peninsulas, and you can see why. Lots of rain on the way through Friday evening. Some models pointing at 50 to 75 plus millimeters falling in that time frame. And then as we get through the afternoon, the temperatures really starting to bump up. Lots of places seeing temperatures in the double digits. Another thing with this one is that it's going to be windy through the day on Friday. We're going to see those winds up across Labrador as well. Cartwright along the strait, even Happy Valley, Goose Bay up above zero, between 1 to 8 degrees as the afternoon highs, but going to stay on the cold side of that one for Lab City as well as Nain, hovering between -6 and -10 as the daytime high. Now as we get into Saturday, temperatures drop like a rock back down to below zero or just above. For most of Newfoundland as well as Labrador, your temperatures are going to dip as well. Cartwright going down to -4, and then the potential for snow will continue for you. And then some onshore flow again, as we see this time of year often with the temperatures dropping, that risk that we could see some onshore flurries or snow squalls develop again on Saturday. And then for the end of the weekend into the beginning of next week, we're looking at those temperatures staying well below where we should be sitting this time of year, between 1 to 4 degrees. Overnight lows dipping as well into the minus single digits. So the first freeze we've seen in a while. And some sunshine, it looks like, on Sunday, but by Monday we're going to return to that chance of showers and about 4 degrees as the daytime high. Now for central Newfoundland, you're looking at flurries pretty much right through Saturday, Sunday, Monday. A mix of either of the two. And then for western Newfoundland, you're looking at snow changing to rain. Temperatures are bumping up again, single digits, mid-single digits by the time we get to Monday. Eastern Labrador, you're looking at flurries through Saturday, then a break as we start into next week. But look, temperatures not really moving too much for western Labrador into the minus double digits with flurries right through the beginning of next week. Take a look at this photo. Signal Hill at sunset. Great shot there.
Oh,
Christine,
wow.
Thank you so much for sharing that photo with us. If you have any weather photos, send them to nlphotos@cbc.ca.
Love the vibrant blue and orange in that. Great shot.
Closer to home.
Yeah.
Yeah, very nice.
Lots of nice sunsets.
Yes. Well, that's it for us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good night.
Good night.